Congratulations, Charlie.
Money savings.
All right, Mr. Hinshaw will present information about the activities of the Long Range Planning Committee.
All right, tonight, just another update. This is the schedule that we're using to that our committee's touring buildings. The upcoming tour is next week at the junior high on the 23rd. It'll be at 5 o'clock, and you all are welcome to attend as well. Jim and Charlotte and Greg are serving on this committee, so they may have more to add as we run through some of the updates, highlights tonight. We just completed our meeting as a committee last week at the high school, and as we go through this year, I'm not going to spend as much time on the topics that we discussed 2 weeks ago, but I just want to keep them up there in front of you all and also the public. So these areas, the buildings that we have looked at, transportation maintenance and Rolla Technical Institute, and those are the areas that we, our committee kind of focused on based on the input and our tours. The high school is a little unique, and I'll put it this way. For example, over at RTI, there were some program discussions that were not cut and dry, but is the program growing? And do you need additional classroom square footage? You know, that's kind of and so those are not easy things to do, but they're simple discussions. There's less, they're not as vague maybe as some of the other topics that were covered at the high school. So a couple of things, several things here that were discussed. The facility seems to have adequate space for the general classrooms. Obviously, we just added classroom space for core classes that obviously we needed for the freshmen to move to that building. And so we're in fairly good shape for that. But there is a need for specific programs that we found. And these aren't in any order of importance. I just, to be quite honest, got these to fit on the screen. So the ones toward the end take up the whole screen, some of the explanation. There was some limited discussion about maintaining and upgrading the current facility, and that's true in every building that we walk into. It's our responsibility, the community expects us to, so I wanted to mention that, that those type of items, the committee doesn't spend a lot of time talking about because we're aware that they have to happen. For example, we have to replace roofs. We have to stay on schedule with that. We have to stay on schedule with HVAC type things and boilers and all those things, because if we don't, then it becomes a real major problem in a school district's budget. So those will be part of the plan, but not something that maybe the committee spends a lot of time talking about on each night. The need for additional classroom space and or renovation of spaces for band and vocal. This is a program that has grown a lot, and even in the short time that I've been here since '05, it's grown quite a bit. So there is some need to address that. We toured this area as well as these other areas that we're going to mention, and we discussed ideas about what can we do in the short term. Jamie asked a question of me tonight about, can we remodel what's there to gain some space for actual classroom space. The reality is you may give up some storage space, you may have to give up some things, and so we've got architects and engineers looking at that currently. So maybe there is a way to resolve some of that issue now. Maybe not the whole problem, but some of it. Possible need for renovation of library center. There was some discussion that focused about possibly relocating that library to a different level in the building, different location, to make it more accessible to the building as it's grown. However, just some renovations in the space that it's in might be considered over the next 10 years. The possible need for an auditorium of some type. And again, just like most meetings, you can get bogged down in some details that really, they're good discussion, it's important discussion, but it may not be, our committee doesn't have to come up with all the answers for how you might do it. It's describing and determining, is that a legitimate need? Is it a vision for, should it be a vision for our school district to consider? You all are well aware, we've discussed the auditorium for a long time. People support the idea, and so one of the things that the committee talked about, or there's 3 bullet points up there: actual program needs versus program desires, spaces that include permanent seating versus spaces that might have flexible seating, where you could use the space for other things. So maybe you design the building where part of it has permanent seating and other parts have flexible seating, roll-out bleachers, with soundproof walls, where that space could be used as a classroom or a practice room or other things. So you might not have the idea would be to make the most of your square footage that you're paying for and be able to use a facility in multiple ways. So that's just some things that the committee talked about. And then obviously the consideration of how often will the facility be used compared to the cost of building that facility and those kinds of concerns. So that's a hefty topic, just when you think about that, compared to, do we need additional space, another 1,500 square foot for automotive programming? 2 different topics. Obviously the price tags are much different, but both are important. And that's what's really interesting is discussing one or the other are just as important for our students and providing opportunities for kids. So it's not trying to pick and choose. We want the best for every program, and we want to try to figure out how our community can do that. The other item was the possible need for a new high school gymnasium, and that might include amenities that weren't considered in 1956. So I listed a few of those that the committee discussed. Space around the main floor for safety. I can remember a freshman building that I was in as a freshman in high school where the wall was 1 foot from the out-of-bounds line. And I think other people in our committee have the same memory of, I don't know if it's the same gym, but at Jeff City freshman building, the wall was 1 foot from the out-of-bounds line and the bleachers were 9 foot above your head, and people just kind of looked over the rail and watched the game. And if you ran out of bounds, you were going to hit a wall. Compared to, but in 56, just space for safety. If you go into a lot of facilities now, you'll see there's space around for not only the athletes, but spectators. Cheerleaders don't have to maybe stand on the floor, on the playing surface. So that's one thing that was mentioned, additional seating for spectators due to population growth. Direct access to locker rooms, training facilities, spaces designed for media, technology, improved technology, sound upgrades, a space to host your media. We televise most of our games now. In 1956 and even in 1980, that probably wasn't an idea that a school district that's our size would be doing that. And then Obviously, areas for ADA, physical disabilities. We try to address that in every renovation we do in our district, and 30 years ago that wasn't really a topic. But it's important to have spaces that are safe for maybe a disabled student or adult to watch an activity, or to get to the activity, even to try to get into the facility. So those are some things that the committee talked about. And just a point down here, just to give you an idea about additional seating. The current facility seats 1,200. It was designed when the population of the school averaged 450, 9 through 12. Now our enrollment's 1,250. So how does that use change, and how have things changed for that? We do have remaining input deadlines from our staff on these buildings, and you as well, and the public. If they want to look on as they watch TV, they could put this link in and go to a site, and they can make comments on any building. To be honest, they could still make comments on the high school or any other building that we've already addressed, and we'll look at every one of those. Appreciate it if people and our staff obviously knows these deadlines. So we'll collect information, and our next tour is at the junior high, as I mentioned. Any questions or comments from you that sit on the committee or anything?
You know, I think it's interesting. We talked at length, as you said, about these issues at the high school, and someone asked, well, should we be guided by practicality, realism, so on and so forth? And as you said, it is somewhat of a visionary effort, and so but you don't want it to be too pie in the sky, but you really do want to dream as well. So, I'm sure the current gym we have in 1956 was a pretty major dream realized compared to the old gym, which was a lot like what you were describing.
I'm sure it was state of the art, and the actual playing surface is not in question. That part of the facility is great.
Yeah.
And you would hear that from coaches, and you would hear that from visitors, and you would hear that from our administrative staff, but it's a lot of those other things that were mentioned that weren't considered even back then. But yes, it was probably state of the art in 1956, and still adequate in some respects. So, but it's not any more important or less important than the automotive classrooms we're talking about. It obviously costs more, but it does impact, and it impacts sometimes different groups, but every item. And you all do a great job as a board to keep that in mind, that we're trying to serve every kid, every student.
One of the comments made about the auditorium was, well, spending that kind of money for the number of students who are in the programs that might use it. But we have a lot of aspects of our facilities that, if you're going to look at in the broad scheme of things, the number of students who utilize it, sometimes is very small. But as you said, you still want to have a goal of providing quality facilities for everything. That should always be your goal. Quality
and just the opportunity. The opportunity, for example, of an auditorium, the opportunity to be on stage and perform in a appropriate setting, and give those people that are interested in that area of education to experience that to some respect. And you can't be gold-plated in everything that you try to do. But you want opportunities for kids, and the community's always supported education and educational opportunities, and everybody's passionate about something. So again, it's just this committee's job, I think, is to look at the big picture and try to design a plan that it's not locked in. It's goals, and then it becomes truly, the committee hands that off, I think, to the board and to the administration and to the community itself to say, what do we want to do, what can we do, and then how do we get that done? And that's the bigger challenge. You can come up with some ideas, but the bigger challenge is how does that become real? And but it's exciting to get to be part of that. So. Good discussions, and we look forward to more, and we'll try to keep you updated and come with a final plan in May or June. May's the goal. All right.
Okay, very good, very good.